Hi, welcome back to another episode of Analyze Scripts. We are here today joined by our good friend and multiple guest host, Dr. Sulman Mirza, and today we're covering Iron Claw.
Yes. I know, Sulman. I feel like, do you know on SNL they give like people who've come back 5 times like a sports, like a gentleman's coat?
Oh, I want a coat.
I feel like you're on your way.
Yeah, or just a cardigan. So I'm just using my
We'll give you a
psychiatrist
therapist cardigan.
That's what we
Yeah, a
need.
tweed cardigan.
We need with the elbow patches and everything.
Yes, perfect.
We'll sew on a little, Analyze Scripts star guest.
In a corncob pipe or something,
Yes,
know?
we need the whole thing.
That's funny. So before we get in case you haven't listened to a past episode with Dr. Mirza, we've covered Gremlins and what was the first one?
Oh,
We've done
One
so
Flew Over
many
the Cuckoo's Nest.
One
Yeah.
Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest,
How could we
classic.
forget? I know. How could we forget?
So he's a triple board certified physician in adult psychiatry, child and adolescent psychiatry, and addiction medicine, which we will be using some of that knowledge base today.
I think all of it.
Yeah.
Oh,
I trained just for this movie.
Yeah, I think you went to school just for it, took all the boards just for it.
Yep.
But he works at a partial hospitalization program with adolescents, as well as is in private practice at Luku Psych, where he sees adult outpatients with a focus on ADHD, autism, and substance use issues. He's a certified provider with the National Basketball Players Association of Mental Health and Wellness Program for the Washington Wizards. And he is on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube channel as The Kick Shrink. So you definitely should be following him. He has some great content that's really clear, quick, and just really informational. So we love having you on.
Including a video about the Iron Claw.
Yeah, I watched it and I was like, I have to process. I was like, this is my own processing of this movie.
Yeah, we just sort of left in utter silence and cried. I think I came home. I'm pretty sure I ate a bunch of chocolate and hugged my dog.
Yeah.
A lot of tears.
Yeah. I think this is
I also saw, Sulman, on your website that in April of 2022, you did something about Euphoria with Sue O'Connell.
Oh, yeah.
Is that the Sue O'Connell I see on the news up here?
Yeah.
Who I love because she's just so quirky. And I'll never forget one time I saw something where she was like, I love going to Vegas, but I hate gambling. Who would have thought? I saw you did that and I was like, no way.
Yeah, that's her. So yeah, we did. I had made some TikTok about Euphoria, and then it kind of blew up a little bit, and then I got that's when I got invited to do Time Magazine. I was interviewed for Time Magazine, and then I was on the Sue O'Connell, that morning show thing. So I was like, oh, this thing escalates pretty quickly.
Sue O'Connell. I mean, for me, I'm starstruck. You might as well have been interviewed by Katie Couric in my eyes.
Yeah. I'll take it.
Pretty big deal. He's a big deal. So anyway, I'm so glad we have such a big wig here. So just to give a little recap of the movie, it's still out in theaters at the time we're recording this. I know Oscar nominations just came out. Did it get? Or no, it would be in the next round, right?
No, it was passed over. It was one of my angry things about the Oscars this year. There's so many snubs. Of course, the Barbie snubs are egregious. This one was pretty bad. My personal favorite movie from last year, Across the Spider-Verse, did not get nominated for Best Picture.
It was so good. I agree. That was a really, really good movie.
Yeah.
I feel every year there's a lot of anger at who's making these choices.
Yeah, it's terrible. The voting system is so broken because it's you have to get the number. It counts essentially how many number one votes you get, not how many number twos and threes. So it's really just a terrible system for how to come up with nominations and awards.
Do you guys ever think about do you ever zoom out and think about are there any other fields where people have created all these award ceremonies to honor themselves?
Yeah, all the time. I think there's always that stuff.
I think it's just a lot of self-importance.
Yeah.
And a lot of narcissism. But it's funny because on the one hand, I'm I want to get dressed up and be honored by, Anthem for being such a wonderful, provider who's saving them money from higher levels of care. But will that ever happen? Never.
No.
I'll get audited.
You'll get audited.
You won't even get paid, let alone honored.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Well, that's a real bummer. I was like, oh, that's a real
Yeah,
bummer. I thought maybe they were in like the running for next year. I
me
don't know how the
too.
No.
system worked. That really
Yeah.
sucks. Because I thought this was a phenomenal movie.
Yeah.
Not only because it starts really early with Zac Efron, like in his tidy whities, where I was like, all right, okay.
There was a lot of tidy whities, and Katrina and I were like,
All right.
and then all of a sudden it got real dark, and we were just
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Yeah, I thought like going into it, I was like, I've heard of the Von Erich family.
Mhm.
Where do I know them? But I didn't know the full story.
Yeah.
And then we got all the tidy whities, and I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be like Magic Mike. Like, I cannot wait to watch this. And I was like, why does Sulman say he cried in this movie? And then
And then
I
everything happens.
and I realized why. So just to give a quick recap. So The Iron Claw is a 2023 biographical sports drama film written and directed by Sean Durkin based on the life of professional wrestler Kevin Von Erich and the Von Erich family. So it has an all-star cast. You know, Zac Efron plays Kevin. Harris Dickinson plays David Von Erich. Jeremy Allen White, who we love, plays Carrie Von Erich. Stanley Simons plays Mike. And then Holt McCalney plays the dad Fritz, and Morna Tierney plays the mom Doris. And then we have Lily James, who plays Pam, who I just always love seeing Lily James. But basically it's a story about, you know, my take from it. And in preparation for this episode, I did a little more research because I left out a couple of the brothers, I think, because they were like, okay, enough drama. There's even more in real life.
Yeah.
But it seems like it was a story about family and intergenerational trauma and the pressure of fame and achievement and masculinity,
Mhm.
you know, in this kind of like in the 80s, like when this is all coming out. So I think like I loved all the costumes and like music and like all of that stuff. But yikes, like it seems like the dad wanted to be a pro wrestler, got pretty far, came up with the Iron Claw, his like signature move, but didn't quite make it. And then was like living through his sons. And you just see all of that pressure right from the get-go and how it affects them all.
Yeah. And I know like we've talked in like about how, you know, professional wrestling, I've talked about it a bunch of times. It's like in general, it's like professional wrestling is this wonderful view of America and family systems and just in general. And this is a wrestling family, right? When we think of like professional wrestling, we think about like the Flairs, we talk about like the McMahons, we talk about like the Rhodes, right? And the Von Erichs, you know, unfortunately, they were died out. You know, not to give a spoiler, but like this was going to be that next big, huge family. And, you know, they almost all died. So,
yeah, the curse, right?
The
This
curse.
like idea of the curse that the father has kind of passed down from them. And I, you know, maybe I didn't catch this, but did it start with the death of their first son, or was it before that?
Yeah, so it's funny like when you do like the reading and stuff about it. So Fritz, the dad, like had taken on this gimmick, right, of being like a Nazi or something like that.
Yes,
right?
I read about that this morning.
Yeah, so he was like a Nazi or something. Yeah, some
He
terrible.
was like the villain, as they
the real
called
villain,
the
right?
heel.
The heels, yeah. So the heel, right? So the you know wrestling is classically faces the good guys and heels the bad guys. So he had taken on this heel, the foreigner gimmick, and you know this is a good old Texas boy, right? In reality, and so apparently there was like a survivor, like a Holocaust survivor, or somebody like in the audience, or maybe like a descendant of that, and they're like, "I'm putting a curse on you." And this is like how this all kind of like quote unquote started.
Oh wow.
And then, you know, because they were offended by it. And, you know, and at that time, right, the curtain hadn't been peeled back. That like wrestling is quote unquote, we're not going to use the F word, but the fake word, we're going to use scripted.
Choreographed.
Right? Yeah, the scripted, choreographed, etc. Right. So
for safety, you got to choreograph it for safety.
Yeah. So the curse had been placed on them because of this. So I guess, you know, even going back, right. So even when we're watching the movie and we get that intro of the kids, right? And you know, they're talking about the first brother who died, right? So there's 6 brothers all in total, and
6.
5 of them die, right? Like before the parents died, right? Like, oh, it's terrible. But the first one dies at like 6 years old in some total freak accident.
Do you know what the accident is? Because I looked it up.
Yeah, like he got like electrocuted and drowned in like a puddle.
Right. So it was 1959. Jack, he was the oldest son. At the time was 6 years old. He drowned in a puddle after being electrocuted by a shorted wire on the outside of a neighbor's trailer.
Total freak accident. Yeah.
Total freak accident. But it's like every single one of their deaths and the death of 5 of your children. I just think I can't imagine anything worse almost.
Yeah. And it was I was listening to your guys' Blindside episode earlier this week, right?
Oh, thanks.
And it was there was something that like caught me was like they had to sensationalize the movie, right, to kind of make it more dramatic. This was the opposite. They had to desensationalize it for the sake of the movie because the real life tragedies were just
way too
unbelievable. Like when you're going through it and you're like, it's unbelievable what they went through.
Right. And it really begs the question of like nature versus nurture, right? Like, I'm so curious about like, is there any mental health history in the grandparents or the great grandparents, or is this all like environmental and stress and injury and, you know, painkillers and, you know, like what chicken or the egg, like what's going on in this family to have so many children die and so many die by suicide.
Yeah. So there's at least, was it 3 confirmed that were died by suicide? There's like the question of David, one of the elder ones, the first adult one who like that was like an overdose, whether it's accidental or intentional or who knows what exactly it was, because he was like overseas in Japan and died alone in a hotel room, so it was very like suspicious. So
just to run down, I guess, the tragedies to keep us all oriented. So again, we start with the eldest son dying at 6 years old in 1959, and then in 1984 David, who I think I wish I had their birth order written down. I don't have it right in front of me, but basically Kevin, who's played by Zac Efron, was like the original like star of the family. Like he was going to be the wrestler. And then like David and Carrie joined in at some point pretty quickly to be like the trio, right? And they would use their dad's Iron Claw, you know, as their finisher, things like that. And we do see that like in the WWE with like the flares, like you were saying, like the next generation will come in and kind of use their old moves. But so David was like, you know, like reaching stardom, you know, and I was reading, he was like 6'8", so he's really tall. I was like, did he have Marfan syndrome? You know, just wondering. He was called the Yellow Rose of Texas, you know, always these fancy names. And unfortunately, like we saw in the movie, he died in 1984. Like he'd almost reached the pinnacle. He was like up for the heavyweight title. He was on a tour in Tokyo, like for promotion. And he died alone in a hotel room. The autopsy report says from acute enteritis, which means acute inflammation of your intestines with a burst intestine. Sounds like an awful way to go. There are some allegations and rumblings that he may have had an eating disorder, like it may have been related to purging behaviors. There may have been a drug overdose. Was it intentional? It's unclear. We see in the movie that I believe at Kevin's wedding, we see him like throwing up in the toilet and there's all this blood. And I don't know if that actually happened, if that didn't. But I think like with these deaths, we start to see, at least in the movie, I think it starts suggesting like Kevin's feeling this threat of responsibility, like almost for every single one. Like there were these points where I think in retrospect, any of us would think like, oh my God, should I have intervened? Should I have done something more? He just has to carry that around. And then, you know, 1 month later, okay, this is
that wasn't clear in the movie.
That wasn't clear. But this is according to some articles, which we'll link in our show notes. But a month later, the dad, Fritz, announces that Carrie, played by Jeremy Allen White in the movie, will step in for David in a scheduled competition. And I'm just like, we all need to grieve, okay? Like we all need to grieve. But so he steps in, and then Mike, the younger brother, who I believe from my reading, I know he should have just been like a musician, right? But I believe from my reading, he was like smaller in stature, quiet, shy, kind, like not a wrestler. But he had to get pulled in to like fill the spot. So already we see like, we just got to fill the trio. We don't care who it is or like what the stakes are. Only a month later, like my goodness, these poor boys. And then
the show must go on.
The show must go on, like quite literally. But so in 1985, according to my research, Mike, the youngest one, his personality starts changing. And I wonder if he was abusing steroids. I've got to imagine probably,
I can't remember. There was some scene. I don't can't remember if it was Mike or if it was. I think it was David, but like somebody's injecting themselves in the butt,
Yeah.
with like
Mhm.
the
Right.
steroids, right? So there's at least a reference that like that was happening with somebody, and
Right.
assuming for it was pretty rampant during that era.
Right.
That whole
Yeah.
era was just rampant with steroids in the field.
Right. It still, might happen.
Yeah.
But so his personality starts changing and he starts getting arrested like a ton
Mhm.
for assault. His first arrest was he was charged with 2 accounts of misdemeanor assault against a physician in an emergency room in May of 1985. He got acquitted. And then he had to undergo shoulder surgery for a dislocation that he sustained in a match. He got toxic shock syndrome, went into organ failure. We see that all depicted in the movie. It's so sad.
Yeah.
But then he like quickly returned to wrestling despite losing 40 pounds, having a lot of cognitive impairment. And the dad marketed him as quote unquote the living miracle. Can you imagine the pressure?
Oh my God. Yeah.
And then things just escalated from there. I think he developed, it says like, addiction to painkillers, depression, drug and alcohol abuse, multiple car accidents, multiple arrests for drunken disorderly conduct. And then sadly, he is one of the brothers who committed suicide by overdosing on Placidil pills. And I didn't know this. They sort of alluded to it in the movie, but they didn't directly depict it, that he was found lying in a sleeping bag near the lake. And he had left several notes for the family that they found, like apologizing, feeling like he embarrassed them, like so much shame. This poor, sweet boy.
That was the hardest, I thought.
When we were watching it.
We were gasping, like out loud.
I was just like, not again. Because they depict him last, and I think actually he came before Carrie and the foot injury, but they depicted him last in the movie, and I was just like, not again.
Yeah.
Not again.
Carrie I think was last in the movie. He was like in the middle. I mean, he was the second death, I guess. Yeah.
It's hard to keep track. But so then Carrie, who's played by Jeremy Allen White, the way they depict it in the movie is he like wins. He's the one who wins, right? Can you imagine? Like, you are the brother who brings it home for dad. Like, wow. And then that night, in the movie, they depict him getting really drunk, maybe using other substances, and deciding to go for a motorcycle ride. And once again, Kevin is like, drive carefully, but doesn't like take the keys or tell him to stop. And then the next thing we see is he's waking up with crutches, and then there's the shocking cut to him missing his foot. And Portia and I both gasped. We were like, what? Yeah. Whoa. I guess what actually happened was he was involved in a motorcycle accident in April of 1986, injured his right foot, but then he returned to the ring probably too early, just based on the timeline of other things in their lives, got injured again, and then had to have the foot amputated. He returned to wrestling with a prosthetic foot. I can't imagine how painful that is, especially prosthetics from the 80s, and developed an addiction to painkillers, subsequently went to rehab, lost his home, got divorced, lost custody of his kids, got in trouble for forging medical prescriptions. And then sadly, he committed suicide by gunshot because he was scared that he was going to go to prison after he was arrested for cocaine possession while on probation. So here's another awful suicide.
Yeah. And this was in the family farm.
Yes. And using the gun that he had gifted to his dad, which we do see in the film. And that's the scene I want to make sure we get into a little more, because we finally see Kevin's rage come out. Just to wrap up the series of tragedies, a year before Carrie committed suicide, another brother who we don't hear about in the movie, Chris, also committed suicide by gunshot wound, left a note. And I think that was one of the tragedies they didn't include, because it was just like, enough.
Unbelievable. Yeah. It's just one of those, like, you're just like, seriously, this happened?
Unbelievable. So this is what?
Did he wrestle?
So a little bit about, I guess, Chris, right? So he was the smallest one. He was like physically had some ailments. He was always like the sick kid.
He had asthma. Was he the one who had asthma?
He had asthma. He had like a bunch of stuff, and he was like the one who really wanted to do it, but like couldn't physically do it. While his brothers are these Olympian. Carrie's an Olympian essentially, until like the boycott of the Olympics occurred. But like these physical Greek gods, right? And then he's just the little sick one, and because of the fact that he was never able to really get to those levels, and then because of Mike's suicide, that led to all of his struggles, and that had a huge impact on him, and that led to his suicide.
I just, we could just stop there. It's just so unbelievably sad.
Yeah.
And I can't even imagine, like, what were you going to say, Portia?
I was going to say about, like, it begs the question of, the genetic, like, ramifications of having, that's why we ask, like, is anyone in your family died by suicide? Because we need to know that, because there's some, research that points to strong genetic components. I feel like more so for them, it feels like it's the other stuff. Pain is a really common part of deaths by suicide. And it sounds like whether emotional and often physical, often addiction is another co-occurring factor with deaths by suicide. But it's like they had really all of them. Maybe there was a genetic component for sure. There probably was, I guess, based on research, but like the pain, the addiction, and then just like the relational stressors and pressures, of course, but it's really, a shocking number of people. And in that level of family, it's usually like an uncle, and then, someone down. It's not this common
to see.
3
out of 6, not 50% of your children don't even read. Like, I'm not sure how old they were, but they were very young.
Yeah, they were in their, like, let's see, 21, 23, 33. So
it makes me wonder, like, if there was a genetic predisposition to something like bipolar disorder, though. Just thinking about, again, it's so impossible to tease out, but like hearing about like the thrill seeking, the substance use, the impulsivity, like stuff like that. Sometimes, like if I were evaluating, if Kevin came to see me in the ER or something, really depressed or something, and I heard this family history, I might think twice before just starting him on an SSRI. I might think like, we don't have anything confirmed or diagnosed, but that's so hard to tease out with the trauma and the, just the environmental expectations.
I was just going to say, like, I think a lot of it had to do with just the time and the era, right? So like, again, like the raging 80s and like late 70s and stuff. And then just that field, right? So the wrestling field, celebrity field, like a lot of this stuff comes with the territory almost.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing a lot, I think a lot of the reasons that I got into like sports psychiatry is because of this, right? So a huge wrestling fan growing up. And then as I'm getting older, I'm seeing like all of my heroes dying.
Yes.
At like, I'm like, whoa, you're supposed to be like 50 years old. You're supposed to be like 30 years. You're supposed to be like 40 years old. And like, you're dying. What's going on?
Right.
Again, steroids is huge. Substances is huge. The
head injuries,
concussions, CT, all these things are just like massive. And the thing, like, again, as the curtains being peeled back and there's been more and more like interviews and podcasts and like surviving people who are living this, going into this and telling their stories of like, we were living on painkillers, right? We were living on just like no sleep and traveling. We were living on like alcohol and etc. just to kind of get through the pain, the physicality of the work.
Yeah.
And again, like we hear this with so many people, not just professional wrestlers, but like people who have physical hard jobs, that like the pain is so profound and so debilitating that the only way to kind of cope with it is to come through alcohol and substances and
numbing.
Right. And we know with like the whole opioid epidemic and then just kind of the, pendulum swinging the other way of like, well, no, we're not going to treat pain because we don't want you to become this quote unquote addict. Right. So, and then people are left to fend for themselves and be like, figure it out, because I don't want to prescribe you some oxycodone because I don't believe you're really in pain.
Yeah. And it's, the head injuries, I think I really always fascinated and sad about like, football, any, wrestling, really just any really high contact sports like lacrosse, where it's like all of these athletes are just having horrible, so a lot of the times undiagnosed or unknown like head traumas over and over and over again, even kids, that then leads to a lot of, changes. We saw that with Aaron Hernandez, the documentary, is that the football player? I guess most notably that's like linked to some of his behaviors potentially. But I just think this was so untapped then, right? Like no one,
for sure,
that wasn't a thing.
No. And we
No.
see that scene where Kevin falls. And I thought,
Yes.
it was
Oh,
really interesting, Sulman. I keep wondering, like, I wonder what it was like for you to watch the movie knowing the story
Yeah.
compared to us not knowing the story. And just be like, ah! But I was like, he's paralyzed. Like, he is paralyzed. Like, I could feel
yes.
the way Zac Efron was acting. I could just, like, I felt paralyzed. Like, I could just feel the pain and, like, that he couldn't even get a breath because he was in so much pain. I thought he did a fantastic job demonstrating that.
Mhm.
How do you live with that amount of physical pain, high expectations? How on earth does anyone do that? Right? Like, how?
And the answer is sometimes they don't.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
It seems like usually they don't. And it's it's just so sad, right? Because I actually got into wrestling. Talk about, like, wow, amazing marketing. Back in, I think it was med school residency when the Total Bellas came on E.
Yeah.
Or no, Total D was first, then Total Bellas, but like great marketing. It totally sucked me in. It was like the female division. And then my husband, I don't know if we were married yet, but he was like, oh my God, WWE, I used to love WWE. Then we started watching it together, like such good marketing. But it's just like, you see all of these like big macho men, and then it's not like 5-10 years after they retired, they are so feeble and injured and like not doing well, and a lot of them die, and it's just awful.
Yeah. It's definitely like one of the sad parts. And like, whenever there's like some signings or something that's going on in the area of somebody, I'm like, I don't know how much time, if this is an opportunity, we're going to have this opportunity again. Like, I got to meet like Mick Foley recently. I was like, damn. And Mick Foley is, he was Mankind back in the day. And he was the guy, that infamous clip of getting thrown off the top of the Hell in a Cell through the announce table, 20, 30 feet off the top of the thing to the floor. And you're like, he had that image of his tooth being through his nose, like all this, like, and he was taking, there was that other movie, I can't remember the name of it right now, like taking those unprotected headshots with the chairs and like being, the king of hardcore and all this stuff.
Yes.
And, like, I was like, why is this guy still alive?
I know. I know.
How is he still alive? And like, let me go at least get his autograph and say hello and thank you and stuff.
Right. I know. It's like it's like the least we can do.
Yeah.
But even when it's choreographed or quote unquote, they're still like, I saw Daniel Bryan in a ladder match one year.
Yeah.
They're still like hitting each other with ladders.
Yeah. You can't fake gravity. Right.
No, I don't think you can.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it's like, if they're like light ladders or something, I think there's still ladders, like you're still like diving and falling and like, holy moly.
Yeah. I mean, there's nobody who's coming out to there being like, well, let's go for a jog now. I feel great. And, like they're hurting, again, it's just, you can't, as much as you choreograph it and you're trying to depict really hurting, you're supposed to depict violence, but trying to do it in the safest way. Like you're still going to feel something, and injuries happen regularly. It's the worst part of like any sport, right? Is that, you're trying to protect against injuries, but they're going to happen.
Yeah. Right. So we'll just use this moment to just as a PSA, please wear a helmet and wear your seatbelt.
Yeah.
Yes.
Please.
I just saw, Katrina, the quote that you included, which I guess maybe talking a little bit about the dad now, that Kevin Von Erich in this past year defended his father, which I feel like I really understand. But he said critics talk about how he made us wrestle and it was all about the bottom line. No, never. He didn't even want us to wrestle. I just want people to know my dad was a good, honorable man who I admire. I'd never say anything about him, and I won't tolerate anybody doing it around me either. Which it's making me think of almost like this is so different, and I'm just gonna go off, like you're gonna be like, where'd you get that from? The Shiny Happy People that covered the family of 11, the Christian family who had the TV show.
Is this John and Kate plus 8?
No, the Duggars.
Okay.
And how one of the daughters, like came out and had all this to say. And I heard her on a recent podcast and I was like, oh, like what else is she saying? And she was like very, I don't want to say defensive, but like very defensive of her parents. And I think it's always interesting, just like that kind of take when it seems like we know, and maybe we don't, because it's a movie and movies can still be in some ways sensationalized, but kids are always really defensive of their parents, regardless of, what they do. But the father, kind of big yikes in the movie, seemed to be really selfish, to put it kind of simply, with just like going through his dream through his kids kind of at all cost. And it seemed it almost like blinded at times with what he was willing to do, or the stakes he was willing to kind of put up to get that belt or to get that notoriety.
Yeah. And it's the whole idea, like we've talked about a little bit too, about like masculinity and like what it means to be a man, and like you have to be strong for the family. And again, that's the whole aspect of like you're representing the family, so you have to be the champion, you have to be top of the game. This is what you do. This is like, no, we don't want you to be doing this career in music, right? That doesn't pay the bills, that doesn't do anything, like, but the wrestling does. So this is a family business.
And also we see that so early when Kevin tries to go to his mom. Oh my God, that just gutted me when he came to talk to his mom. And this happens a couple of times throughout, right? And she says to him, like, that's for you boys to figure out. Like, he's coming to her trying to say, I'm worried about, I think at first it was Mike. He's like, Dad's being way too hard on him. And she's just like, I'm trying to get ready. Like, that's for you boys to figure it out. That killed me. Like, that really was like a knife in my chest. And then we kind of see that reaction just throughout the movie. But I also think, like, maybe especially of the times, or at least in that family structure, I could see how the mom would be submissive to the dad. And he's, the man of the house. He's the head honcho. What he says goes, and she doesn't have a lot of power. It just really killed me. And I did love, and this is where I just like bawled my eyes out, the very end.
Oh yeah.
When, just get out of town, when he's watching his sons play football and he starts crying.
Yeah.
And it's just so beautiful that he could tell them, like, they come and ask him why he's crying. He says, I used to have brothers. I'm like going to cry talking about it. He said, I used to have brothers and I miss them. And then he says something like, oh, sorry, boys, you shouldn't see me cry. And the boys say, in such childhood innocence, it's okay, Dad. We cried too when we hurt, or something like that. And I was just like,
we see you crying. They're like, we've seen you cry.
Yeah. And they're the ones like normalizing it for him. And I was like, I have to go home now. I can't.
Yeah. That was really emotional. I mean, like, I wonder if the mom, like, kind of checked out because of the initial death of the first son, and just was like, I can't even like get really involved with you, because what if the loss, like she said, right? Like, you're kind of waiting after one child dies or one son dies, like, for it to happen again, which I thought was interesting. I don't know if that's related to the curse or just something that, again, was in the movie and she felt, but it was so like, it was really upsetting to see, but it's like, is that a trauma response? Is that a mix of the time and a trauma response? I don't know.
I saw that, I think they quote in an article I found that we'll include in our show notes, in the biography, Fritz von Erich, Master of the Iron Claw. I believe in there, they quote Doris, the mom, as saying, after you lose the first one, I can't even like say this, there's that nagging fear you'll lose another. You not only believe it can happen to you, you know it's going to almost. It's a horrible thing to live with, and I became very protective of the boys. I can't imagine. But I think, like, when you go through something traumatic, I think it's human nature to be so scared about it happening again, whether it's that trauma or, like, in a broader sense, just like bad things, right? And I'm sure we've all seen in our clinical practices patients who've been through an inordinate amount of trauma, right? Like, you just have some patients who you're like, my God, things just keep happening to you, and they start to feel cursed because you're trying to sort it out and figure out some explanation for why is all this happening. Because if you can figure out why, then you think, okay, I can do something to prevent it, right?
Yeah.
And it's I feel like this is the crux of, like, trauma work, is coming to sit with the acceptance of, like, you can't always prevent bad things from happening. But in coming to that acceptance, hopefully you also absolve yourself of guilt and responsibility, or the people around you, if it's appropriate. Like sometimes there is, a murderer to blame, or, something like that.
Sure. The mom scene that got me was when she was picking out the dress again. Oh God. And she's like, I can't even like look at the dress. She's like, they're going to know that I've worn this before for the other funeral.
I
was just
can't
like,
even.
I was done.
I feel like right now I'm dissociating from this conversation. Like I just can't even,
And Pam was such a nice
feel for her.
Yes. I mean, like it's just lost that like, happens in the world, I'm not naive to that, but like just no one should have to, right? They say, no, you shouldn't have to bury your kids. Of course, like it's unnatural, but like just the amount of loss that's an unnatural loss is like, I don't know how people go on. Like, I mean, thinking of a lot of, the deaths via suicide in the movie, but like the parents, I mean, I don't get it. Like it's an immeasurable grief.
Yeah.
Five
out of six. I just can't even. And then poor Kevin, like
Survivor's Guild, right?
I know. Oh my God. And we see that throughout the movie. And then we see him pulling away from his wife, right? Like sleeping at the gym, and because he's scared. He's so scared. And I would love to pick your brains about this idea of the curse.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like it's like an externalization of the trauma as like a reason to try to sort it out.
Yeah. I think we always look for something to blame, right? Something else, right? Instead of, being able to kind of do a little bit of digging and be like, it's the family dynamics at play and it's the product of the environment. It's a lot easier to kind of say it's a curse. We see this so many times, like in psychiatry and like mental illness as a whole, because I was talking about with Dr. David Peter yesterday, like that we look for something, right? In psychiatry, it's very abstract, right? There's no blood test, there's no x-rays, there's no imaging to kind of definitively say, aha, here's PTSD, or aha, here's ADHD, right?
Don't let the Amen Clinic tell you otherwise.
Right. This was the exact conversation, because we were busting on Dr. Amen a little bit, but like it was that aspect of like, you want something, right? And we see this a lot of times too with like autism families, right? They want something to blame this on. Where did this come from? It's because of this. And this is how we get into the whole like autism myths and like all the misinformation that comes with vaccines and like all this other stuff that like vaccines cause autism, because it's easier to say that instead of just being able to say this just happened. Sometimes it's part of normal humanity.
I see that a lot. Sorry to interrupt, but I see that a lot in reproductive psychiatry. What I do, a lot of women are like, it's my hormones. And sometimes it is. And then sometimes it's human experience,
it's just
or stress or, other things, but spot on. We're always searching for that.
Yeah. So instead of being able to like really look at it and be like, it's because my dad has created this environment and we're pressure against ourselves or within ourselves, we've created kind of like this competition within ourselves. We're in this high pressure, high impact, high physical occupation, job, and lifestyle, and using all these substances and all this other stuff. We can just say it's a family curse.
Hey, and that's where I'm like, I was really astounded to read Kevin's like really heartfelt quote about his dad, because like I don't think I would have the same view, but then I also think like what Portia was saying, it's still your parents. So like you still want to see the good, and maybe there were good things that we didn't necessarily see depicted in the film. But like, my goodness, I just wish Fritz had looked inward a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, the scene where the dad blames, like, verbally, Kevin for Carrie's death, is just so hard to watch. I mean, I feel like my face was just like disgusted in that. Well, he called you, and it was just like, whoa. I mean, and then, Kevin like finally kind of loses it and is like doing what, is kind of expected, right? He has like a physical response. But I mean, my God, like it was it was kind of like a long time coming. I mean, no one's saying anything, but again, like we've kind of talked about why, and then him being so hard on him for the business, right? Well, like, you don't know what you're doing. Don't you dare sell it. And finally, it's like he has to get out
He has to
and
do
like
it. Yeah.
be
Thank
his
God he
own
did.
independent self with his family. And, they're living in like a 1-bedroom apartment because they don't have any money. And then he finds that his dad has been like taking what it's just like, it was this whole kind of wake up call to just really focus on what he has himself, which is like, and then I think we kind of see him divert from the curse almost. It's like, well, what I have is good and I'm going to nurture that. And that's important. Like what we do matters. And we can change the trajectory of, outcomes. But
right. But it's so hard. And I mean, for Kevin to do that, I mean, he's setting some major boundaries and walking away, putting his own needs first. I'm just like, I also think in this family, like they must also have such resiliency, like the parents to just keep going, Kevin to be able to do that and pull away. We didn't ever see him go to therapy and learn how to do that. Like, where did he find that? Like, wow.
Or it's all just suppression, right? Suppression, denial, and avoidance, right?
Okay, fine, Sulman. Let's fine. I guess we could look at it that way. That's true.
Yeah.
I did read that. Kevin retired in 93, moved to Hawaii with his family in 2006. I love seeing that picture at the end of them all looking so happy. But I did see his sons pursued professional wrestling careers. Yeah. I was just like,
they're still in it.
And I think like, I feel like I keep hearing about or reading about like trauma bonds. I'd love to pick your brains about this because as far as I know, that is not like a clinical known thing, but we hear about it a lot. And I can like, I'm on board with it. I feel like there's a lot of trauma bonding going on in the Von Erich family.
Yeah. And so trauma bonds I think there's like a misrepresentation of like what trauma bonds are. It's not like, oh, we went through the same trauma, so now we're like buddies and buddies. It's more the aspect of the bond that occurs from the victim to the abuser. Victim to the abuser because of how the abuse occurred, and the fact that like that's the connection that's there.
What's the word I'm trying to think of when it's like kind of related when you're kidnapped and you start like
Stockholm syndrome.
It's like it's more like that than like we're peers in it. It's like with the the power differentials. It's like that's where that comes from. It's in that relationship. Maybe a little bit more groupthink with like in wrestling, in these like unique kind of environments, right? It's like I think of like ballet, and they kind of share this environment. Wrestling shares this unique and where these like there's these norms occur. It's normal to do this. This is just how we do things,
but not outside
exactly.
Of it. Yeah.
Which I feel like I see more, or I contribute that to like groupthink versus like a trauma bond. But so what other scenes did we want to talk about? I think there was like I thought it was interesting his just relationship with Pamela when she first says hi to him and he's really taken aback because he thinks that she wants to talk to his brother. And she's really direct, and I feel like for the first time he's like, oh, like she asked him these really like intense questions, or do you have a problem with me working, or like what if I went to this, and he's like, no, like sure. And I think it's just he needs that, and I really like their dynamic. I think she really helps him, even when they're not kind of living together and he is away. I think that's like a reason like he almost can't tolerate that anymore, that pull. She's so like important and like grounding for him. I really liked her character.
She was like the way out.
Yeah.
And I think I instantly thought of like when you were talking about like the ballet, that shared experiences aspect of it, like they don't know anything else, right?
Right.
That's just the world that they've been raised and brought up in. I mean, think about it. So like it's just they're living on the farm, right? Dad is this wrestler, he's running this company, just boys, right? Just brothers. right? They're all raised to be like physical and active, and
they're always like
obviously
building a fence,
building stuff, right? They're doing farm work, right? They're always like on the farm,
but it was
working on the
always like
farm,
they're working on this fence.
working
It's
on the
just
farm.
like the longest fence of all time.
That never gets done, or it's just
No, it never does.
gets done.
That's the point. That's like so symbolic. You'll never get there. You'll never make them happy, no matter what.
Will never get done. But yeah, so like then Pam comes along, and it's like, who is this person? What is this outside world? Almost.
It was so sweet that he doesn't even know like how to interact with girls or dating, right? Because all he does is wrestle and build the fence.
Yeah. And like, the first time they have like sex in the car, and like he's like, what am I doing? Is this okay? Like, there's just no idea of anything else.
Yeah, I wondered if they had a girl. Like if
they
did
have a daughter.
Oh, they did?
I think they had two.
I think the real story. So like I actually had like girls first, and I think just for the purpose of the movie, they turned them into like boys, just to kind of go with the boy masculinity theme of it.
Okay. Well, if I make it fictional, I wonder what girls would have, how they would have impacted the family. Just from, in the movie, it's very like, but I guess it doesn't change. I don't know.
You mean the Von Erich, like with all the brothers?
Yeah.
I feel like they would have been totally ignored.
There's, you're talking about like the next generation. There's actually a Von Erich girl who's wrestling. One of the girls is wrestling. I can't remember whose daughter it is, but one of the boys' daughter is actually like, she's a wrestler, or she was a manager or something like that. She was in the industry as well.
So they were just staying in this field. Like, I mean, but again, it's like, that's what they know. That's what, even though it's not been safe, it's like this, it's the devil we know, right? It's like, we know what to do. We know how to navigate this field, and we know who we are in it. We're important in it too.
We know our place.
We have meaning. Yeah.
There's reverence also for them. There's a lot of kind of, again, like one of the things I really appreciated about the movie, that it wasn't like a hit job. It was done like super respectfully, like super like honor. Like I know there was wrestlers, like active wrestlers that were involved in the making and the production of the movie, who have like great respect for them. They,
even of the dad, it was,
it wasn't just like this, like, and even like with dad, like it wasn't just this like, you're a terrible person kind of thing. Like there was nuance and respect. And again, like Kevin is saying nowadays, like we love dad and we don't want to like besmirch his name. So there was that respect that was there. And, they were inducted to the WWE Hall of Fame, all these things that like the Von Erich name still mean something. So that's like,
like even someone like me, who's like, I don't really know wrestling. I'm like, I've heard that name.
Yeah.
But I think it's just so sad that, like, was it worth it? Like, and the whole time in the film, I just found myself wondering, especially for the dad, like, is it really worth all of this? Like, what do you, I want him to go to therapy and figure out, like, what are you searching for that you don't already have?
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard.
I know. I find myself, I say that a lot, and respectfully, but with teen clients, it's like, oh, I just wish my mom would go to therapy, and it's like, like it sounds like, and I always say, well, everyone really could benefit from therapy. That's my personal opinion, and like, it sounds like there's some emotional dysregulation skills that could be learned in your family. So like, I think it's so regarding the different levels of people, it being kind of life or death, therapy being a helpful way to just communicate well and like learn yourself and like what's important to us. And I don't know, I said that this week to a teen who's like, really wants their mom to go, and I was like, a lot of parents should go.
Oh my God, that's just, I really feel for that teen. Like, it's a painful place to be in, especially when you're still dependent on your parent, to really yearn for them to seek change and sit with that helplessness, especially as a teen.
Yeah, we have a kiddo like in our PHP now. Like I'm trying to like see how to do this, but like without violating like HIPAA stuff, but like could really benefit from. Well, I mean, in general, we can say like we're making a recommendation almost for like residential treatment center because the parents just don't have their shit together.
Like, right, like to get you in a new environment.
Just for that, and just be like, do the parents need like a month or two just to kind of focus on themselves so that they can then provide some kind of safe environment and some kind of stability for you, the teen. And that's, the situation that occurs.
I feel like that's why I have such respect for people who practice child and adolescent. I thought about it, and then I thought it was so hard in my rotations because I wanted to write a prescription for parents, like just new parents or new home or new, that. And sometimes you just have conversations where you're like, you're almost in college. Like you're so close,
Yeah.
And then when you like backtrack though, like usually the parents, there's something that happened to them. That's why they're struggling. And, it's just, it's bigger and bigger. And like this film, I think you were saying, Sulman, I thought it was very respectful overall and just really highlighted like the human condition in such a way that was so moving. And now I'm really mad it didn't get nominated for an Oscar.
Yeah, I thought it was next year. I was like, of course it is.
Of course. Yeah. That's shocking.
It's this year. So it got overlooked. And I don't know if it's like the stigma against the wrestling business and all that stuff, but like I thought it was, I mean, the wrestler with Mickey Rourke was nominated. I think
for a ton of things. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Their performances. I mean, giving them props. Like they're I think it's Chavo. He did on Instagram. He talked a lot about how impressed he was with Zac Efron.
I think they actually did the wrestling.
Yes, they had to learn, the physicality of it and how they committed so hard and were so determined and just really respectful of doing it well. He really appreciated and commented on it. And I have to say, I agree. Like it was phenomenal. We felt it, I cried. I usually try to avoid sad movies. This was unexpectedly very sad.
I know. We were like, Magic Mike and wrestling.
Yeah. But it was impressive. Like
it was so
loved
good.
it. I've told everyone to see it. Like it's just, I've seen some funny TikToks of people after it in their movie seat, unwell after. And I was like, same, but
I know. I think when we were leaving, Portia, we barely said goodbye to each other.
We were like,
oh, okay, I'll see you later.
I think this is one of the few movies where I was just openly just weeping in the theater. I reached that age where now I can allow myself to cry. maybe I've been self-realized where I've allowed myself to cry, but I was just I was done. I was taken out. The scene where they're when they're in heaven.
I forgot that scene.
Oh my God.
And they meet Jack.
They meet Carrie's I guess he meets somebody who's I guess you're my brother, Jack. Brother. I guess you're my big brother. Oh, done.
And then I was
well done. I think it just, I feel like that scene, regardless of beliefs in afterlife, was so moving and well done, where it just, they were at the farm. It was in a field, and I was yes,
one of them's coming in a boat.
Yes, that's how I just pictured. It was
felt
so good.
Sad that Kevin wasn't with them.
Yeah,
and they're waiting for him. They're nicely, but they're ready to meet him when he comes. And I was like, I can't.
And
I can't even.
Yeah, it gives us. There was that little piece of, and it was the theme of the movie too. And I think that's what people need to remember too. Is the brothers loved each other.
I know.
They wanted to be with each other, and I think we can postulate and guess whatever it is. Some of these suicides were related to that of being I miss my brothers and I want to be with my brothers.
I know.
Which is just, again, devastating.
And having access to drugs and alcohol, which influence your decision making, and firearms. We know that access to firearms increases risk of suicide and the likelihood of it being successful. So it's just the perfect storm.
Storm.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Well, after you listen to this episode, watch a Disney movie or something.
Yes.
Actually, don't, because parents die in all the Disney movies.
True. Watch Big Bang Theory or I don't know, something silly.
That's my go-to, another brother movie.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Sulman, thank you so much once again for joining us. We always love having you here. We love your insights. I was so excited to talk to you about wrestling because I know you're really into it. Thank you so much for recommending this to us. I hope everyone flocks over to your YouTube and Instagram and everything and looks at your Iron Claw video because it's really good.
Thank you.
Do you want to let everyone know where they can find you?
Yeah, so YouTube, Twitter, our YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram is the Kick Shrink, KICKS, SHRINK, with the in the front, because of my love of sneakers that's taken over my house and leading to my wife wanting to divorce me. But no, she won't leave me quite yet. But that's the main stuff. So
Okay,
yeah.
great.
Awesome. And you can find us at Analyze Scripts Podcast on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. And we will see you next time for another new episode.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.